Fishing is my favorite skill in Stardew Valley. It's simple, relaxing, and generally just a fun way to pass the time or make a little extra money on the side. Not to mention, the fact that there are so many different types of fish to catch, some being much rarer or more difficult than usual, gets the completionist part of my brain itching to fill out this entire collection over the course of the game. But looking at all these fish got me thinking, just how many of them could you catch in a single in-game day? What sort of tactics and strategies would that involve? How far could you push it? In theory, could you complete this entire collection, start to finish, in just one day? It seemed like a straightforward question. Little did I know that trying to answer it would take me on a 200+ hour journey filled with friendship, discovery, heartache, and, algae. Like, a lot of algae. So grab your iridium rod and a bowl of seafoam pudding, because today, we're tackling the Master Angler Challenge in Stardew Valley. Before we can even think about getting our bobbers wet, we're going to need a plan. A good place to start is by looking at exactly what we're up against, namely, how many fish are there in Stardew Valley, and what does catching them actually involve? The game keeps track of every fish you've caught on this tab in your inventory. Counting them up, there are 67 different species here. Of those, 55 are caught with a fishing rod and 9 are caught using crab pots. The other 3, green algae, white algae, and seaweed, aren't fish in the traditional sense, but they're tracked here just like any other fish, so we'll count them too. You'll most likely catch these as a byproduct when hunting for other fish regardless, so they're essentially freebies that we can ignore. And if we're being thorough, there are actually 5 fish that aren't tracked in this collection, the family members of the legendary fish that appear during Mr. Chi's extended family quest. But even if I wanted to include them in the challenge, I technically can't since the original legendary fish don't show up while this quest is active, making it physically impossible to catch both sets of fish on the same day. For simplicity's sake, we'll just stick with catching the standard legendary fish. Going back to the collection, we'll set aside the crab pot fish for now and focus on the much more complex group, the rod-based fish. Most of these fish can only be caught in specific areas, during specific seasons, at specific times of the day. Some even require specific weather to boot. As you can likely imagine, all of these restrictions are kinda problematic when it comes to this challenge. There's no single day that fits the criteria needed to catch every fish, not even close. So is this challenge dead before it even starts? Luckily for us, no. There's actually one item in the game that solves this problem quite elegantly. Magic bait. This colorful fishing bait can be purchased from Chi's Walnut Room on Ginger Island at a rate of 5 Chi gems per 20 pieces. You can also craft it yourself if you buy the recipe, also from the Walnut Room, for 20 Chi gems. While it's on your hook, Magic Bait lets you bypass the time, season, and weather requirements of every fish, meaning that you're only restricted by the location where you're fishing. Want to catch a sunfish during a rainstorm? Sure. Feel like a midnight carp at 6 AM? Why not? Hunting for a glacier fish in the summer? I mean, you'll probably still fail since it's the glacier fish, but you're welcome to try. It really is a catch-all solution to our core problem. That said, completing this challenge isn't as simple as slapping some magic bait on our rod and calling it a day. There's a lot more to consider, starting with one major complication. In order to have the best shot at doing this, having the highest fishing level possible will be essential. A higher fishing level means less time between bites, as well as an easier time reeling in the more difficult fish. Not to mention, 4 of the 5 legendary fish have level requirements before you can even hook them, the highest being level 10 for the legend. Ordinarily this wouldn't be an issue since, by the time you reach the Walnut Room in the first place, you would probably have done more than enough fishing to hit level 10. Problem is, I want to start with an empty fishing collection and fill it up in a single day. And since catching anything, whether by rod or crab pot, would fill its spot in the collection, I have to find a way to reach level 10 fishing without fishing. Thankfully, there are a few methods of earning fishing experience points without actually catching anything. They're all much slower than just fishing normally, but with enough time and patience, you can still use them to accrue the 15,000 experience needed to hit level 10. First, trash. If you've spent any time fishing in Stardew Valley, you've probably reeled in your fair share of worthless junk. Broken glasses, soggy newspapers, the flagship product of the Joja Corporation, nothing anybody would typically care about. But interestingly, you still gain 3 fishing experience when you hook trash of any kind. Mathing that out, level 10 fishing is only 5,000 trash bags away. With this approach, you'll want to be sure that you fish in an area where you can catch the most trash without wasting time on real fish. You'll also want to avoid locations with green algae, white algae, or seaweed, since these still count for the collection. Floor 100 of the mines fits both criteria, making it the best place to do this by far. The only fish that lives down here is the lava eel, and it only bites about 5% of the time, giving you a beautiful 95% trash rate. But we can do even better with our second approach, fountain fishing. Located just southwest of the community center is this unassuming little fountain that, weirdly enough, doubles as a fishing hole. Except no fish actually live here, so you'll only ever reel in wood, stone, and the occasional trash can, all of which give 3 fishing experience just like trash. Not only is this method more efficient, you can also start on it as early as the second day of spring when you get your bamboo pole. Plus, unless you've got a field of recycling machines, wood and stone are generally more valuable resources than broken CDs. All in all, as much as I have a soft spot in my heart for trash, this strategy is better in basically every way. But honestly, both of these are pretty abysmal, right? Like, I enjoy fishing a lot more than the average player, and even I think that catching 5,000 pieces of stone or trash or whatever sounds like cruel and unusual torture more than anything. I'm not beyond doing it if that's what it takes, but there has to be a better way, right? This time, thankfully, the answer is yes. Introducing fish ponds. These farm buildings not only serve as a fun and unique diversion from the typical gameplay loop, but they also happen to be the perfect solution to our problem. They're significantly more complex than the other methods we've discussed though, so let's break down exactly how these work. Once a fish pond has been built, you can plop almost any fish you like into it. Given enough time, ranging from 1 to 5 days depending on the species, your fish will reproduce, adding 1 member to the pond's population. You can accelerate this process by manually adding more fish of the same species, but only until you hit their current maximum population size. When the fish try to reproduce again after they've hit this threshold, a little yellow exclamation point will appear over the pond, and this is when the magic happens. Checking the fish pond at this point will show you that the fish are requesting some kind of item they need to expand their population. The exact item requested depends on the species, and more valuable fish generally need rarer items. But fulfilling this request not only raises the maximum pond size a bit, it also grants you a good amount of fishing experience, ranging anywhere from 25 to 45. This process then repeats for their new maximum population size, continuing all the way until they hit a population of 10, the largest possible size. These quests already make for a nice bonus experience, but where fish ponds really shine is in the produce they provide. Every day, your fish have a chance to create an item for you to collect, usually roe, but a lot of other items are available depending on the species. The chance for this to happen depends on the current population, with more fish yielding better and more frequent items. And as you might have guessed, collecting this produce grants fishing experience too. The amount you get depends on this formula, where the deciding variable is the selling price of the item. So the more valuable your fish and their produce, the faster you'll level up. Fish ponds have a lot more quirks to them, and I could honestly go on for a while given how cool they are, but that's the gist of why they're good for this challenge. They provide efficient, passive, daily fishing experience that'll eventually get us to level 10. Seems like the perfect plan. Of course, it's never quite so simple. We run into 2 main hurdles with fish ponds. First, you need 5 green algae and 5 seaweed in order to build one at all. We can't fish for these, so we'll have to resort to other means for gathering them. Green algae is easy enough. It's dropped 10% of the time when killing green slimes, one of the most common monsters in the game. Seaweed is a bit trickier, but it's by no means impossible. It can be found while foraging on the beach farm or on this small southern strip of the beach across the eastern bridge. It's also available by scouring the garbage cans around town, although foraging for it is much more reliable. Still, it's by far the rarest beach forageable, so it'll probably take a while to amass even 5. Thankfully, once we've got our first fish pond up and running, we can drop any of these 6 fish into it and they'll have a chance of producing 1 to 3 seaweed every day. But that brings us to the second problem with fish ponds. How do we get fish for them in the first place? Fortunately, this is a simpler problem to solve than it might seem. There are a surprising number of ways to get fish without actually catching them yourself. You can source them from trash cans, buy them from Krobus on Wednesdays, or rely on our old friend the traveling merchant. A couple can even be dropped by monsters, namely the ghost fish from ghosts and crabs from rock crabs, the latter of which is especially useful since it's one of the 6 fish that produce seaweed in the fish pond. There are also quite a few things that we can simply forage from the beach that technically count as fish for the purpose of fish ponds, most of which will also produce seaweed. With all of these options, finding fish to keep our ponds full should be the least of our worries. With that, I think we have enough groundwork to actually get started. There will be more to figure out when we get to the actual fishing part of the challenge, but we have our starting goals: acquire magic bait and hit level 10 fishing by way of fish ponds. Sounds simple enough, but believe me, we've got a long road ahead of us. Before the first day even began, I made sure to select the beach farm to maximize my seaweed potential, and then Fishy Farm was born. My daily routine was pretty standard to begin with. I needed to finish the community center to reach Ginger Island in the first place, so I focused on all of the basic chores involved in doing that. Otherwise, I made sure to check the garbage cans every day, both for seaweed and fish, as well as a little extra green algae, and I repaired the bridge on the beach as early as possible to facilitate my seaweed hunt. Willie tried to tempt me into breaking the rules of my challenge pretty much immediately, but I managed to hold firm, and despite being unable to fish just yet, having this bamboo pole will prove useful later on. More on that in a bit. I established a friendship with Linus pretty early on. Linus is a cool guy, but that's not the only reason I'm befriending him. It's actually pretty integral to the challenge. We won't get to see why for a little while, but see if you can figure it out on your own for now. It didn't take long to start seeing results from trash cans, and the green algae was piling up from trips to the mines too. I'd also had incredible luck foraging for seaweed, having already collected 5 by the 19th of spring. One visit to Robin's later, and my first fish pond was done by the 22nd. I promptly threw in a crab I picked up from the mines and left it to do its thing. On the 26th, I purchased a midnight carp from the traveling merchant. While it isn't an incredible fish for fish ponds, this was a huge deal for a different reason: seafoam pudding. Once we reach level 9 fishing, we'll learn how to cook this delicious, briny dessert. Eating it boosts your fishing level by 4 for a few minutes, and this boost can take you past level 10 fishing, making our effective maximum level 14, 15 if you enhance it with cheese seasoning, available from the Walnut Room. The ingredients to cook seafoam pudding are flounder, midnight carp, and squid ink. And while a single midnight carp might not seem all that special, we can turn this lone carp into an infinite supply of them through the magic of fish ponds. Let me explain. While roe and other items are the main produce you get from fish ponds, you can also harvest the fish themselves from the pond with a fishing rod. Since they'll reproduce until they hit their maximum population size, you can continuously fish them up without ever running out, so long as you leave at least one fish in the pond. Collecting fish this way doesn't yield any fishing experience, nor does it add the fish to your collection, meaning we can do this without invalidating the challenge. So provided I can get my hands on a flounder and a squid, which produces squid ink instead of roe in its pond, we'll be swimming in seafoam pudding in no time. I continued with my farm chores as well as other completely necessary endeavors, and I was further blessed by collecting not 1, not 2, but 5 seaweed on the same day, meaning I had enough for my second fish pond already. Hilariously, I didn't even have enough money for it yet, so I had to save it for later. Summer rolled around, and with it came my very first bit of fishing experience. The community center was coming along nicely too, and I was feeling optimistic that maybe this challenge wouldn't take as long as I thought. That said, one ominous, salty specter loomed large over my head: the fish tank. This assortment of bundles wound up being a major sticking point for completing the community center. I couldn't catch any of these fish myself, so I'd have to rely exclusively on garbage cans, Krobus, and the traveling merchant to provide them. I've done this once before as part of my No Level Up Community Center challenge, but that didn't make it any easier. Even in that challenge, I eventually caved and caught the last fish manually. I didn't have that choice here. This time, I was at the mercy of the RNG gods. At least the crab pot bundle came quickly, since that one can be done entirely through foraged items and rock crab drops. But it'll probably be a good while before we can complete any of the remaining bundles. Progress steadily continued, and I managed to build my second fish pond halfway through summer. I tossed in a sturgeon since it's the most valuable fish I had at that point, and my oysters surprised me with 3 seaweed at the same time. Not only was this good for future fish pond prospects, but it also gave me the experience I needed to gain my first fishing level. I'd done quite a bit on this farm already, but this felt like the first sign that I was making real progress. Of course, each level after this was going to take more effort than the last, with longer and longer wait times between each one. Level 2 fishing requires 3 times as much experience as level 1, and it only gets worse from there. I was in this for the long haul. Or so I thought. With my steadily growing network of fish ponds, it was only about a week into fall that I reached level 2. And a few weeks after that, level 3. Then level 4. At the end of my first year, by following my flowchart of scavenging fish, foraging seaweed, building fish ponds, and repeating, I'd already hit level 5 fishing with 8 ponds to my name. I'd also been making rapid progress in the community center, and generally building a solid farm to work from later in the challenge. Upgrading my house to have a kitchen, getting a horse and stable, stockpiling materials for items I might need to craft, things like that. I even had time for a few, diversions on the side. Year 2 is when things really kicked into high gear. The amount of fish ponds that were producing seaweed for me, combined with some good forage luck, meant that Robin was busy near constantly building more ponds, constructing 3 of them in spring alone. This skyrocketed me through levels 6 and 7 of fishing, something my lovely wife helped me celebrate. Not long into summer, Jody's garbage graced me with a flounder, the second ingredient needed for seafoam pudding. I promptly tossed it in its own fish pond, and as if things couldn't be going any better, the traveling cart blessed me with a super cucumber just a couple days later. In terms of raw fishing experience, this is the best fish I could have hoped to find, and considering that I wasn't even halfway to the 15,000 experience needed for level 10, this was quite the boon. I hit level 8 fishing shortly thereafter, celebrating with an interesting cutscene and a bit of Junima cart to unwind. And, okay look, this has nothing to do with the challenge, but can we have a moment of silence for this tragedy in Glowshring Grotto? A few days into fall, I picked up a tiger trout from Krobus, one of the few fish I still needed for the community center. I popped it in a fish pond, just in case I needed any extra, but funnily enough, the tiger trout is the only fish in the game that doesn't reproduce, meaning you can't get any more via fish ponds. A neat little parallel to tiger trouts in real life, and it might throw you off if you don't know about it, so I figured I'd mention it. Even with this little hiccup, level 9 fishing came in short order, and the end of the first leg of this journey was in sight. With so many fish ponds giving me ample experience every day, I knew that level 10 wasn't far off. I powered through the rest of fall, excited to hit my first big milestone. I even took the time to paint my farmhouse an appropriate color for the occasion. And then, just one short week into winter. Honestly, pulling this off before the end of year 2 was something I couldn't have predicted going into this challenge. I had no idea just how lucrative fish ponds could be for fishing experience. I also didn't realize how many fish ponds I'd be able to construct in that time, 23 in all, especially given my limited access to materials. Needless to say, I had gained a newfound appreciation for these things. But remember, hitting level 10 fishing was just the tip of the iceberg. My next order of business was to unlock magic bait. Only then could this challenge truly begin. However, one massive obstacle still blocked my path. The community center. After consistently checking my various sources for nearly 2 years, I still had 4 fish left to find. The chub, walleye, catfish, and tilapia. 2 of these are available from Krobus, and Linus can actually send a catfish in the mail, so the main sticking point would be getting a walleye from the traveling cart or garbage cans. But while thinking about the logistics of all this, I had an epiphany. Did I actually have to finish the community center? My true goal was to reach Ginger Island and unlock the Walnut Room, but there are technically 2 ways to do that. I could either complete the community center, or I could buy out the Joja Community Development form. This option was something I so rarely consider, something I've never actually done in a legitimate playthrough, that it took until this point for me to remember that it even existed. I had more than enough money by this point, so it seemed like a no-brainer, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just overly sentimental, but seeing the community center this close to completion, it felt like it would be betraying both the town and myself if I gave in to Joja at this point. Sure, it's just a silly video game challenge, but I still have standards. Still, getting these 4 fish, all of which would take who knows how long to show up, was a daunting prospect. I took some time to mull it over, and as if the game could read my mind, Krobus offered me a chub just a few days later. This cemented my decision. No matter how long it took, no matter how many trash cans I had to search, the community center would be finished. I forsook all my other duties, going so far as to sell all my beloved farm animals, to focus entirely on finding these last 3 fish. I even sank 2 million gold into the return scepter, just to streamline my search as much as possible. My persistence paid off after just 1 short month, as Linus sent me a Maki roll in the mail. This in itself was worthless, but when someone sends you a present in the mail, you can reset the day and change the item you received, drawing anew from their list of possible gifts. A mere 3 resets later, and I suddenly had a catfish. 2 bundles remained. Another month later, and the traveling merchant granted me a walleye, the rarest of the final 2 fish. Then, by some miracle, the tilapia appeared in Krobus's shop just 2 weeks later. I made a beeline for the community center, completing the final bundle that very day. And as a cherry on top, I'd found a squid during this search too, meaning I'd have plenty of ingredients for seafoam pudding when push came to shove. Everything seemed to be falling into place. I wasted no time patching up Willie's boat, sailing to Ginger Island, and blitzing my way to 100 golden walnuts in just 1 month. I was immediately blessed with the danger in the deep quest once I arrived, something that would give me ready access to all the radioactive ore I'd need to craft magic bait. A short while later, I purchased the fabled recipe, and the stage was set for the true beginning of this challenge. With the most basic requirements finally taken care of, let's have a closer look at exactly what we need to do to catch every fish in 1 day. There are a lot of things to consider when trying to find the best approach to this challenge. What items and equipment do we need? What route should we take between the various locations? Is a certain day or season better than the others? All of these questions are important, and at the end of the day, they all deal with confronting this challenge's biggest, most intimidating foe: time. Every day in Stardew Valley begins at 6 a.m. and can end as late as 2 a.m., when you'll pass out from exhaustion. Of course, time moves much faster in-game than it does in reality, so that 20-hour time frame gets crunched down into just 14 minutes of real time. When you consider how many different places we need to go, as well as the fact that most of your time fishing will look like this, 14 minutes just doesn't sound like enough time to catch all 67 fish. But what if I told you that 14 minutes is actually the minimum length of 1 full day, not the maximum? See, certain actions in the game will cause time to freeze while you're doing them. Talking to villagers, sorting through chests, picking crops, just to name a few. Fishing is no exception, although it's a bit more complicated than it might seem. To see why, it's important to understand exactly how fishing works. Fishing can be broken down into 4 distinct phases: casting your line, waiting for a bite, reeling the fish in, and the catch itself. Of these phases, time only pauses during one of them, the minigame portion, which is probably the first thing that comes to mind when you think of fishing. During every other part of this process, the clock is ticking. This means that we'll have to minimize the time spent during each of these phases to maximize our chance of success. 2 of these phases, the cast and the catch, are simple enough. The closer you cast the line to where you're standing, the less time is spent watching the bobber land and waiting for the fish to fly through the air into your hands. Now, fishing this close to land is counterintuitive, and you might think that we'd end up catching a lot more trash, or the fish wouldn't bite as quickly, or something like that. In reality though, this isn't actually the case. In general, the farther your bobber lands from shore, the higher its fishing zone will be. Your fishing zone does affect many aspects of fishing, but crucially, the time between bites isn't one of them. And while it does technically mean we'll catch more trash than average, when you factor in our obscenely high fishing level from seafoam pudding, this effect is basically non-existent in practice. But that still leaves the final phase, waiting for a bite. Fishing is a notoriously random process, and nowhere is that more clear than during this step. Once your bobber hits the water, the game starts a timer to decide when you'll get a nibble. This timer can be as short as 0.6 seconds or as long as 30 seconds. That's a huge range, but thankfully there's a lot we can do to whittle it down. First, every fishing level reduces the maximum bite time by 1/4 of a second. At level 15 fishing, this equates to a 3.75 second reduction. Next, we can look at fishing tackle. These are different styles of lure that you can attach to an iridium rod for a variety of effects. The only one we care about right now, though, is the dressed spinner, which further reduces the maximum bite time by 7.5 seconds. These are easy enough to craft, so we'll have a few on hand for when they break, which happens after 20 catches. Finally, having bait on your rod, and this includes magic bait, cuts both the minimum and maximum bite times in half. That could still be a long wait for a single fish, but it's leagues better than the 30 seconds we started with. And believe it or not, we can still do better. While both normal and magic bait reduce the bite time by 50%, there is a third kind of bait, wild bait, that cuts it by 62.5% instead, meaning our true lowest max time is about 7 seconds. You get the recipe for wild bait from Linus's completely normal and innocent 4-heart event, which is why I went out of my way to befriend him earlier. But, hold on, we can't use both wild bait and magic bait at the same time. There's only one spot for bait, even on an iridium rod. Why do we care about this? The answer is that magic bait, despite being the only item that makes this challenge possible, also leaves us vulnerable to the dark, twisted powers of probability. Yes, magic bait lets you catch any fish in the area regardless of time, season, or weather. But let's consider what that really means. Instead of a small pool of fish to choose from, every time you cast your line, you're opening up a Pandora's box of Piscean possibilities. And while that's great when you haven't caught any of these fish yet, the more of them that you do catch, the lower your odds of finding the one that you actually need. This is where wild bait comes in. By strategically switching to wild bait to catch the fish that are available without magic bait, we simultaneously increase the odds of finding those fish and minimize the time needed to find them. It's not a perfect solution, and we'll still have to play the magic bait lottery for quite a few fish, but we need every advantage we can get at the end of the day. The natural question this raises, though, is what conditions allow for the most fish to be caught without magic bait? While I could go into the minutiae of explaining every fish's catching conditions and cross-checking them all against one another to find the perfect day, let me just skip ahead and tell you that a rainy day in winter is probably our best option. It won't ever rain naturally during the winter, but you can use a rain totem to force a rainy day, giving access to a couple more fish than usual. On a similar note, there is one other piece of equipment that helps mitigate the problem of fish diversity: the curiosity lure. This unique type of tackle makes certain species of rare fish significantly more likely to bite. It specifically works on the legendary fish, the fish in the mines, and the night market fish, all of which can be pretty elusive. We do have to forego the reduction in bite time from the dressed spinner to use the curiosity lure, but in theory it should help cut down on the total number of casts needed to find these finicky fish, saving time overall. Curiosity lures are the only tackle that can't be crafted or purchased, meaning we'll have to get them as rare drops from mummies or other special loot. Thankfully, I managed to snag a couple of them during my initial playthrough to get here, and we really shouldn't need more than 2 or 3 given the small subset of fish they work on. The final thing we can look at to reduce our time spent per fish is the most integral piece of equipment in the entire challenge, the fishing rod. More specifically, what enchantment we want on said fishing rod. At the top of the volcano on Ginger Island, you'll find the Forge, an ancient machine that can be used to imbue your tools and weapons with powerful new effects. By sacrificing a prismatic shard and 20 cinder shards, you'll get a random enchantment on your chosen tool. In the case of the fishing rod, there are really only 2 enchantments worth consideration: the Master enchantment and the Auto Hook enchantment. Master is basic but strong, providing a flat +1 bonus to your fishing level while using the rod. This would slightly reduce our maximum bite time and make it easier to catch difficult fish by increasing the size of our fishing bar, both valuable assets. On the other hand, Auto Hook makes it so you don't have to click or press any buttons when a fish bites, automatically plunging you into the fishing minigame immediately when you get a nibble. Reacting to a fish in time isn't all that difficult, but it does waste a few moments per cast, and this reaction time adds up pretty substantially over the course of an entire day. Auto Hook would completely negate this, probably allowing for a few extra casts overall. Both of these enchantments are solid options, but I settled on Master for the time being, which I realize now while editing looks like a really stupid decision. I mean, if we rewind just a bit, did you see how small the reduction in bite time from the Master enchantment actually was? It's literally less than 1/10 of a second. And don't even get me started on the difference in the fishing bar size. I checked, it's 8 pixels bigger, which isn't even a 4% increase. Meanwhile, Auto Hook's over here casually saving enough time for a minimum of 3 extra casts, usually a lot more. Obviously I should have done this comparison while actually playing through the challenge, but better late than never, I guess. It seemed like a good idea at the time, I promise, and I do eventually realize this mistake, but the first chunk of the challenge was done with the Master enchantment, so just bear that in mind. and I actually decided to enchant 2 iridium rods, both with the master enchantment. I stocked one with magic bait and the other with wild bait, just so I don't have to worry about switching bait on the fly. So now that we have every piece of equipment we need, as well as an idea of what type of day we want to do attempts on, we're finally ready to catch our very first fish, right? Well, not exactly. We may have done everything we can to speed up the angling part of this challenge, but what about actually going to all the different places we need to fish? And on top of just getting there, is there an ideal order we should go in? What route gives us the best possible chance at catching everything? While the majority of the fish we need can be caught in one of 3 places, either the river, the ocean, or the mountain lake, there are still a ton of fish that can only be caught in really specific locations, most of which are pretty far off the beaten track. I settled on a decent route to begin with, but I fully expected it to change as I became more familiar with how long I'd need to spend in each area, which fish were available at what times, and the shortest paths between every location. And regardless of the route itself, there were still a few tricks I could use to expedite the process no matter what. To start, I primed my inventory with all the standard gadgets you might expect when trying to navigate the world of Stardew Valley. Plenty of triple shot espresso and spicy eels for speed, warp totems for every occasion, and a horse flute to summon Nemo at any chance I got. Next, I purchased the community upgrades from Robin. For those unfamiliar, once you've completely upgraded your own house and finished the community center, you can opt to have Robin build a house for Pam and Penny, provided you have the money and materials to spare. As wholesome and kind as this is though, it's technically just a stepping stone on the path to the next community upgrade, the town shortcuts. By forking over an additional 300,000 gold, you can have Robin construct shortcuts around Pelican Town that make it significantly faster to move between certain areas. Notably for this challenge, these shortcuts include a very quick path between the mountain lake and the river in Pelican Town, and a path between the beach and the Cindersap Forest, which otherwise requires a significant detour. It's a lot of money and extra effort to save maybe 30 seconds or so, but if I want to give myself the best chance at doing this, I'm going all out. Lastly, the very first fish I catch, regardless of the rest of my route, is always going to be the legend. Every fish has a difficulty value associated with it that determines how tough it is to catch, and the legend has the highest difficulty value in the game, so getting it out of the way first is a smart move, but that's actually only part of the reason to go for it first. See, since I haven't actually caught any fish up to this point, despite being level 10 fishing, the game still gives me a tutorial prompt when I hook my first catch. This prompt will show up until you catch at least 1 fish, and while it's active, it's impossible for you to fail the catch unless you actively cancel it. The game just doesn't let it happen. We can exploit this to repeatedly cast our line until we hook the legend and reel it in, saving us the trouble of having to catch it the old-fashioned way. You can technically use this trick on any fish as long as it's your first catch, and there's an argument to use it on the glacierfish or octopus or any other notoriously difficult fish, but there's something that just tickles me about hooking the apparent king of all fish as my very first catch. It's also a pretty short jaunt from using the mountain warp totem to catching the legend, making it a quick way to start off any attempt. So, now that we have everything we could possibly need both to navigate the world with relative ease and to catch everything, it's finally time to start fishing. At least, that's what I would say, if not for crab pots. If you remember back to the start of the video, I mentioned that 9 of the 67 fish we need are caught using crab pots, 6 from saltwater crab pots and 3 from freshwater. And while you might think this is as simple as placing a bunch of crab pots around the day before our attempts, I wanted a more elegant approach. I wanted to have exactly 1 of each crab pot fish ready to be picked up in an easily accessible place somewhere along the route. No more, no less. And there is actually a way to guarantee this, but in order to do it, we're going to have to talk about time travel. Yes, really. When you bait a crab pot, what you get from it the next day depends on just one thing: location. Not only the body of water it's in, but the exact tile you put it on. This means that, for example, if you were looking for a periwinkle but you catch a snail instead, no amount of resetting the day will change the contents of that crab pot. You're stuck with that slimy little mollusk. But what you might not know is that you can actually rewind time by a single day and move that crab pot to a new location, meaning you'll have a fresh chance at catching that periwinkle. To do this, you have to be playing Stardew Valley on a platform that lets you access the directory where your file is saved. By navigating to this directory, you'll find the beating heart and soul of your Stardew world, this file with your farm's name and seed, and this file called Save Game Info. Together, these 2 files contain everything that makes your farm yours. For me, they're the entire culmination of the time and effort I've put into this challenge so far. So let's delete them. This leaves us with 2 similar looking files. They have the same names as the core files, but with _old after them. These basically serve as a time capsule, preserving the state of your farm exactly as it was one in-game day ago. So by deleting the main files and then renaming these backups to get rid of that old portion, you can effectively step back in time. Typically these are here so you can revert to a previous day if your existing save file became corrupted somehow. But we can exploit this to manipulate the contents of our crab pots exactly to our liking. By placing down some crab pots, sleeping to the next day, noting the locations of the ones we need, then going back in time and strategically only placing those crab pots, I successfully managed to get all 9 required fish lined up for the Day of Reckoning. Again, none of this was required by any stretch, and it would have been way easier to just line these areas with enough crab pots to guarantee I'd catch at least one of everything, but you can't deny that this method is way cooler, and that has to count for something. Alright, no more fakeouts, no more stalling. It's time. After so many hours spent researching, planning, and setting everything up, the only thing left to do was to put all the pieces together and hope it would be enough. I spent the entire day before my attempts making sure everything was in position. I baited my rods, whipped up some seafoam pudding, and arranged my inventory precisely how I wanted it. I even went so far as to do a trial run of my route and clear any wayward debris out of the way for maximum travel efficiency. I hadn't come this far to skip on the details now. At long last, the sun set on that final prep day, and a flame of excitement ignited in my gut. Not wanting to waste another moment, I called upon the power of the rain totem, let Chloe and Haley share a kiss for good luck, and went to bed, ready to wake up the next day and fish like never before. Winter 11th, Year 3. Welcome everyone to the beginning of the longest, most arduous fishing expedition in Stardew Valley history. Here we go. Despite all of the research and preparation I'd done up to this point, I really had no idea what to expect when I actually started fishing. No one had attempted this before, so there wasn't any kind of precedent to measure myself against. Would it be surprisingly easy and I'd catch everything with hours to spare? Maybe I'd only catch a fraction of what I needed and I'd realize it was an impossible task. Anything was possible, and I honestly anticipated this being an open and shut case one way or the other. My first couple of attempts fizzled out since I was mainly trying to find my sea legs, but somehow, on just my third attempt, well, let's just watch and see how it went down. I immediately gobbled a spicy eel and triple shot espresso for breakfast before warping to the mountains, running to the edge of the lake, slamming back a seafoam pudding, and casting for the legend. You may be confused as to why I didn't pick these crab pots up along the way. Well, remember how I want to use this first fish tutorial to guarantee catching the legend? As it turns out, this tutorial doesn't show up if you've caught any other fish beforehand, including fish from crab pots, so we'll have to double back for these at some point. Alright, now we can get back to fishing. Just kidding, you'll be seeing a lot of this overlay in the upper left from here on out, so I should probably explain what it all means. At its core, this window shows what fish are available in the current area, as well as whether I've caught them or not, indicated by the silhouette getting filled in. But you'll also notice that I've separated the fish into 2 different segments with this line. Fish above the line are ones that I'm required to catch before moving on, either because they aren't available anywhere else, or because this is the most convenient place to catch them. Fish below the line are all available in other areas that I have yet to visit, meaning that while I wouldn't mind catching them here, I'll have another chance at them later in the route, so I don't need to catch them just yet. Additionally, any fish highlighted in magenta requires magic bait to catch, while all other fish can be caught with wild bait instead. These icons at the bottom indicate what bait and tackle combination I'm currently using if you want to keep up. I did my best to remember to switch which setup I was using, but I am human, despite any evidence to the contrary, so I wasn't always using the perfect combo for the situation. That should be all you need to know to keep up with what's going on, so let's get back to the challenge. For real this time. I swiftly caught the legend before turning my focus to the lake exclusive fish. At this point I hadn't yet realized that I could save time by casting closer to shore, so you'll see me fishing as far out as possible for most of this run. Regardless, I managed to catch a bullhead, perch, lingcod, and largemouth bass before snagging the final required fish in the area, a sturgeon, just past 8 AM. I hurried south to hunt for the angler next. I managed to get lucky with a rainbow trout, catfish, sunfish, and salmon before finally hooking the legendary fish. I stuck around after this since I thought that the smallmouth bass was exclusive to the river in town, but it's available from the Cindersap portion of the river too. Regardless, I managed to catch both a pike and a smallmouth bass before charging north to collect the freshwater crab pots. I continued up to the mines and managed to reel in a stonefish, ghostfish, green algae, and ice pip, all before noon. I warped straight to the beach and gathered the remaining crab pot fish before sinking into the longest unbroken stretch of fishing bar none. So many fish are available in the ocean, and I have to fish at this spot in particular to have a chance at hooking the 3 night market fish, which are among the rarest fish to catch even with a curiosity lure on hand. But fate was apparently smiling on me for this one, since I managed to land all 3 of them before 4 p.m. On top of that, I hauled in quite a few of the rarer and more difficult ocean fish, including a squid, pufferfish, eel, and octopus, in addition to a slew of other catches. Nerves were definitely high at this point. I proceeded to the dock by the tide pools where the crimson fish lives, and I snagged him easily enough. I kept fishing for more ocean exclusives, but the amount of fish I'd already caught led to quite a few repeats, wasting considerable time. I still managed to pull in a super cucumber, flounder, halibut, sardine, red mullet, herring, and anchovy before 8 p.m. though, which actually finished off everything I needed at the beach. I rode up to the sewers and managed to catch the mutant carp, regular carp, white algae, and slimejack without much fuss. I exited the other side of the sewer into the cindersap forest, putting me in a good position to catch the remaining riverfish. Unfortunately, this is where my luck ran out. The glacier fish didn't give me much trouble, but between some long wait times and a fair few repeat catches, I only landed 6 more fish before 2 a.m. approached, making it too late to continue. At the end of the day, I had caught a total of 57 fish, 10 shy of a full collection. This honestly stunned me. The fact that I had gotten this close to completion so early on, without having optimized my route or anything, had me hugely excited. This was possible. Difficult, sure, and I'd definitely gotten a little lucky on this attempt, but given enough time and determination, I was more than confident that this could be done. But as it turns out, that surge of confidence wouldn't last long. I carried on fishing, racking up more and more attempts in search of the perfect run. Granted, the majority of these didn't get too far, with most being stymied by the legend refusing to show up early, but I still saw at least a third of them through to completion. But even those that went the distance only caught 40 to 50 fish on average, well short of my personal best. All of these attempts totaled nearly 18 real hours spent fishing in the same spots over and over again, resetting the same rainy, dreary day in the vain hope of recapturing my beginner's luck. During these long, lonely hours, I began pondering, searching for any advantage I could press, anything I could leverage to save more time or improve my chances. It didn't take long for my mind to wander into the realm of superstition, trying to make sense of the random assortment of fish I was catching. Did some species prefer one tile over another? Would angling my cast affect anything? How about the direction I was facing? Maybe fishing closer to shore really did hurt my chances. At one point I even tested whether the time of day, like the actual physical time when I was playing the game, would impact the type of fish I caught. To say I was desperate would be an understatement. The only real nugget of wisdom I gleaned during this time was to avoid catching fishing treasure chests whenever possible. Time doesn't pause during the opening animation, so it wastes a second or so every time it happens. Yet despite any adjustments to my strategy, route optimizations, or crackpot theories, I simply couldn't recreate the luck I'd been blessed with so early on. Attempt 64 exemplified this, being my worst performance by far at just 39 fish, and this served as a wake-up call. I went back to the drawing board to see if there was any way I could tangibly improve my odds. I settled on 2 big changes. First, I realized the auto-hook enchantment would save more time overall, given just how many fish I was catching. So I loaded a backup save and set about re-enchanting both rods. I had to grind more prismatic shards and cinder shards to do this, and I picked up this deluxe pirate hat during the process, which I took as a sign that I was on the right track. The second thing I recognized, albeit begrudgingly, was that maybe catching every fish was too lofty of a goal. Yes, I had already gotten remarkably close, but the past 20 or so hours had shown me exactly how lucky that run had really been, which in turn made me see how much more luck I would need to eke out those last 10 fish. Was it possible? Probably. But was it worth the commitment? I wasn't entirely sure yet, so for the time being I lowered my goal to 60 fish instead. It still felt like it would be enough of an accomplishment to satisfy my inner challenge gremlin, and given my experience up to this point, I knew that even 60 fish might still be too much, but anything less would feel like a failure, so I made my peace and settled on this number. With my new goal in mind, I quickly realized that I didn't need to catch every fish in an area before moving on. Instead, I could leave a couple rarer ones behind and try to bolster my collection with fish from other areas. This new approach, despite feeling like a compromise, did prove promising early on, with most attempts catching 50 fish or more before capping out. And in keeping with that trend was attempt 82. Okay, so here's the thing. You've actually already seen the first half of this attempt. Or at least, you may as well have. Since the route I've been using hasn't changed, attempt 82 is functionally identical to attempt 3, my personal best attempt that I walked you through earlier, right up until the Cindersap Forest, the only real difference being the exact fish I caught in each area. And as you can see, I had caught notably fewer fish up to this point than during that third attempt. However, what attempt 82 lacked in quantity, it more than made up for in sheer speed. Back during that third attempt, I made it to the forest and started fishing by about 9:30 p.m. On this attempt, it was only 6:30 p.m., a full 3 hours earlier. Seeing just how far ahead I was, combined with my lowered goal of just 60 fish, this was the moment that I realized I had a real run on my hands. Hoping not to squander this chance, I gave myself until 9 p.m. to catch as many fish as possible here, believing that I could make up for any fish that I missed with ones from areas yet to come. And thankfully, the forest didn't let me down. In this short time, I managed to catch the glacier fish, rainbow trout, tiger trout, shad, sunfish, walleye, midnight carp, lingcod, salmon, chub, and bream, meaning I'd only missed out on 3 freshwater fish, one of which I'd be able to catch later anyway. Heart pounding in my chest, I warped to Calico Desert and made quick work of both the sandfish and scorpion carp. From there, I warped to the mountains and gunned it north to the Witch's Swamp, eager to nab a void salmon. And that's when everything went so wrong. Ordinarily, the only fish available here at all is the void salmon. You can only catch trash and algae otherwise, which theoretically means that snagging a void salmon should be quick and easy. If it's raining, however, then regardless of season, you can also catch catfish here. Seeing that I still needed a catfish, I figured it would be a nice bonus if I could get one here while hunting the void salmon. And it was a nice bonus. The first time, anyway. But then I caught another. And another. And another. By the time I finally hooked a void salmon, I had caught 5 catfish. Between that and the slew of algae and trash, I had spent nearly 2 hours in this swamp, only to boost my collection by a measly 2 fish. This tore the wind clean out of my sails, but I still had a glimmer of hope that I could pull this off, so I teleported to the Wizard's Tower and galloped my way to the secret woods, where the wood skip proved similarly elusive, taking me all the way until 1:30 a.m. to catch. Desperate for even one more fish, I warped to Ginger Island and reeled in a last-minute blue discus, and then I was out of time. Despite skipping a few fish in earlier areas, despite wasting so much time on that void salmon, despite it all, I remained optimistic. It had felt like a killer run, and all I could do now was hope it had been enough. I turned to the collection page, counted them up, and saw that after everything, I had, in fact, set a new record of 59 fish. 59 fish. Literally 1 fish short of my new 60 fish goal. This could have been the run. Should have been the run, even. If only I had cut my losses in that swamp, or come to Ginger Island sooner for the bigger variety of fish. If only I had gotten just 1 extra fish, somewhere, somehow, this challenge would have been over. But even so, I was happy. Overjoyed, in fact. Not only was this my first new record in over 20 hours of attempts, it proved to me that my route, the one I had been practicing, learning, and refining all this time, could actually go the distance. all I needed was one more chance. One more lucky run to beat the odds. And next time, I would be more than ready to clutch it out. So with the fire in my belly burning anew, I reset the day and did what I do best. I kept on fishing. So, despite how fun that might have looked, it was actually the 6 most grueling, painful, demoralizing hours of the challenge so far. Mainly because I did all of those attempts in one long, unbroken marathon. Trying, failing, and trying again to recapture the luck I needed. And by the end of this session, I desperately needed a break. So I decided to take a step back and re-examine my entire approach to the challenge. My current route and strategies had taken me far, sure, but that didn't mean they couldn't be improved. And with all the experience I'd gained across 30 hours of fishing in this cold, damp purgatory, I felt like maybe I'd have some additional insight into what I could do better, even if only a little bit. So I dove back into research mode, examining every granular aspect of my strategy for things I'd overlooked, scouring all of my failed runs for any common threads of consternation, considering every strength and every weakness I'd been able to discern. And at the end of it all, I came to one earth-shattering realization. I'd been fishing on the wrong day all this time. As we established earlier, the best day to do attempts on is one that minimizes the need for magic bait, specifically because magic bait causes the pool of fish to increase so dramatically that finding the specific fish you need becomes much harder. Following that logic led me to a rainy day in winter, which are indeed the best conditions for this challenge. But let's focus in on that core problem caused by magic bait, increased fish diversity. Are there any factors other than the season, weather, and bait that can impact which fish are available where? Is there any other day in a Stardew Valley year that changes the fishing conditions? 2 words. Night market. Starting winter 15th and going through the 17th, the night market opens up on the beach in Pelican Town, and with it comes a deep-sea submarine ride, a cool, relaxing journey to the bottom of the ocean that grants access to the only place where you can naturally catch the blobfish, spookfish, and midnight squid. 3 fish that can only be caught with magic bait otherwise. 3 fish that are exceedingly rare outside of this area. 3 fish that bloat what is already the largest pool of fish in the game by far. If I were to do my attempts during the night market itself, my odds of catching not only these 3 fish, but every other ocean fish would be substantially higher, seeing as they no longer have to share the same area. It felt like at least part of a solution to the biggest problem plaguing this challenge. However, switching to the night market does have a few ripple effects. For one, it can't rain during the night market even with a rain totem, which means that magic bait would be required for a couple more fish than before, namely the walleye and red snapper. But since it was only 2 fish, it felt like a reasonable compromise. Plus, I wouldn't have to worry about a rogue catfish ruining my run at the witch's swamp anymore. Not that I'm still bitter or anything. You also can't have crab pots at the night market, meaning that I'd have to find new homes for them. A little time travel experimentation later, however, I managed to set up a good stretch of them on this path to the Pirate Cove, which I'd need to visit for the stingray anyway. But moving my attempts to the night market wasn't the only change I made to my approach. In keeping with the idea of avoiding magic bait where possible, I decided to revisit this idea of the wild bait gambit from earlier. While this strategy makes sense on paper, there's one glaring problem with it. Since the first step involves catching all the fish that require magic bait, it means that you're contending with the largest possible pool of fish for the majority of your time in each area. And more likely than not, some of the fish you catch during that time will be ones that you could have caught faster using wild bait anyway. So what if I instead reversed this approach and focused on catching all the fish available with wild bait first, then just kinda tried my luck with the ones that need magic bait? The rationale here is that you hook fish significantly faster with wild bait, meaning that you'll save time by using it on as many fish as possible in an area, assuming you don't get too many repeat catches once you switch to magic bait. This new strategy does necessitate a dramatic overhaul of my established route though. Since I'll want to maximize my use of wild bait, I'll need to be in specific locations at specific times to have the best chance at snagging various time-sensitive fish that would otherwise require magic bait. But after staring at these fish time charts on the wiki for far too long, I settled on a route that made a good amount of sense. It has one major bottleneck, being that I have to finish these early areas with enough time to comfortably catch an octopus and tilapia on Ginger Island. If I pull that off though, the rest of the route actually has a decent amount of leeway. Enough leeway that it almost felt like this new approach could have the potential to catch even more than my 60 fish goal. No, I shouldn't get too ambitious. 60 fish is still plenty. So after loading a backup save and setting the stage one more time, I woke up on the first day of the night market and put my new route through its paces. It admittedly took some time for me to get used to this new path, given how much time I'd put into learning the first one, but I could tell almost immediately that I was onto something. This felt different. Good different. It was hard to place exactly why or how it was better, but it only took until my 121st attempt for me to catch 57 fish, making it at least comparable with the old route. And not long after that, attempt 140 demonstrated exactly how much potential this new approach had. It began the same way as any other, by catching the legend and the lake fish as quickly as possible. I did actually use magic bait for the lake fish, which goes against my general strategy for this route, but the pool of fish here is small enough that it felt like a reasonable risk. And it paid off this time, netting me 3 extra fish compared to what I needed. I ran down to the river and swiftly hooked the angler, plus a wayward catfish, before switching to wild bait in order to catch the remaining native fish. But seeing that my window to reach Ginger Island was closing, I left behind the lingcod and ran off to the mines, prepared to reset if these capricious little fish took too long. Thankfully, both the stonefish and ice pip cooperated well enough, and I was on my way to the island just past 11 AM. Not a ton of time to hook the octopus, but enough to give it an earnest effort. And to my surprise, I actually hooked an octopus first thing, but my heart sank as I failed to reel it in. I proceeded to catch a flounder, tuna, lionfish, and pufferfish, but without an octopus, which was the main reason to come to Ginger Island so early, it felt like I'd wasted too much time, and I just had to. With just 10 minutes to spare, another octopus took the bait, and this time, I successfully pulled it in. No time to lose, I hooked the blue discus and tilapia back to back and booked it east to the Pirate Cove. Luckily enough, I'd already caught the majority of the fish I needed here, and after just a few rogue catches, I sealed the deal by catching the stingray too, landing me on the beach just past 2 PM. Admittedly, it wasn't an astounding pace. I've been able to reach this point by 1 PM or earlier on other attempts, but it was just good enough that I felt compelled to continue. I was only looking for 3 time-sensitive fish on this first visit to the beach, all of which would be available until 7 PM. And despite the sardine hogging the spotlight at first, I managed to hook all 3, plus a herring and some seaweed, before 4 PM. My next stop was Calico Desert to secure a sandfish and scorpion carp, and I made up a good amount of time here, snagging both fish in just 2 casts, allowing me to warp to the mountains and have my bobber in the Witch's Swamp by 4:30. And since I'd already caught a catfish earlier, I put all my focus into the void salmon, adding it to my collection just past 5 PM. And here's where this run took an interesting turn. On my way to the secret woods, I actually made a pit stop at the forest pond to take advantage of one major factor I have yet to mention. This challenge's ultimate wild card: bubbles. If you've spent any time fishing in Stardew Valley, you've almost certainly seen a bubbly patch of water like this at some point. These indicate higher than normal fish activity, and by landing your bobber in these bubbles, you gain 2 benefits. Your effective fishing zone is increased by 1, and fish bite 4 times faster than usual. Regardless of whether you're using magic bait or wild bait, this is a huge bonus that enables you to catch a lot more fish in a lot less time. Needless to say, they're a game changer. But they're also notoriously, vexingly random, hence why I haven't brought them up until now. When it comes to bubbles, we're entirely at the game's mercy. We can't influence where they show up, when they show up, how long they last for, or even whether they appear at all. They're far and away the most powerful tool we have, but they're also the only one we can't control. One saving grace is that they'll still appear in the same spot regardless of how many times you reset the day, so these bubbles in the forest pond showed up on every single attempt. Once I noticed them, I made sure to incorporate them into the route, stopping here to catch as many freshwater fish as possible before they vanished, which would always happen at 6:50 p.m. Now this might seem like a bad place for bubbles to spawn, given the small selection of fish in the pond, but interestingly, when you use magic bait here, you're able to catch both pond and river fish, since both bodies of water are on the same map. Normally magic bait doesn't let you bypass location requirements, but this is the exception to the rule, it seems. This lucky happenstance netted me 4 additional fish in the hour I spent there, which was 4 fewer that I'd have to worry about on my return trip. Getting back on track though, I hightailed it to the secret woods and caught a wood skip on my first cast, allowing me to warp to the night market just past 7 p.m. And as I rode across the dock and began the slow, tense ride to the bottom of the sea, nerves crept in. This night market strategy was the linchpin I'd built this whole new route around, and if it let me down now, it would be a huge blow to my morale. Was this really the best path forward? My answer came quickly, as I hooked the spookfish, blobfish, and midnight squid in a mere 40 in-game minutes, faster than I'd ever done it before. Stunned, I warped to the surface and sprinted for the tide pools for my final round of saltwater fishing. And I actually got lucky enough for more bubbles to spawn, which had the added benefit of letting me catch the crimson fish here instead of running to the end of the dock like usual. Yet even with this advantage, I didn't feel all that confident that this run would be anything special. Don't get me wrong, this was a standout pace, and it felt great that my new route and strategies were paying off, but I'd done this too many times to get my hopes up. The worst of the RNG was upon me now, and with 7 more oceanic fish still to catch, odds were that this run would sputter and die here. I resigned myself to the fact that this would be a good run, but not a new record. And then I caught an anchovy. Then a super cucumber. And a squid. Red snapper, halibut, eel. Suddenly, all I needed was an albacore, and in just over 1 in-game hour, this run ascended from a solid pace to an absolute juggernaut of its kind. Finally, after more than 35 hours of attempts, this was the run I'd been seeking. All I had to do now was make the most of it. Flabbergasted, I took off for the sewers. It took a bit longer than normal, but I caught the mutant carp and slimejack before darting over to Arrowhead Island and pulling in the glacier fish at 1 a.m. Fueled by pure adrenaline, I pushed Chloe to her limits, catching a last-minute sunfish and lingcod before passing out at 2 a.m., fishing pole still in hand. My heart pounded in my throat. This had felt like the run of a lifetime, and I knew it had to have been at least as good as my personal best. Hands shaking, I turned to the fishing collection in my inventory to see the final result of 64 fish. I jumped out of my chair when I saw this. Not only had I shattered my personal best, not only had I blown past my 60 fish goal, I had gotten within striking distance of catching every single fish in the game. An astounding feat, and one that I was legitimately super happy with. I had finally met my goal in an all too theatrical finish, too. The challenge was, at long last, over. If there was one thing that I learned from attempt 140, it was the importance of bubbles. Yes, fishing during the night market had helped, and yes, the new route felt much better than the old one, but without those 2 bubbling patches of water to bolster my odds, I don't think I would have gotten as close as I did. So I decided to run with it, incorporating both spots into my route. This worked wonders, making runs from that point on much more consistent overall. The majority of attempts still falter before getting anywhere near the bubbles, but the ones that did, more often than not, went the distance. 62 fish here, 63 fish there. These runs transformed from flukes and anomalies to reliable milestones that motivated me to keep on going. On top of that, I could feel my own skills improving as the hours wore on. I began to recognize each fish's unique pattern, allowing me to cancel the catch and move on if I'd already caught that one. I became more adept at recognizing when a run wasn't worth continuing and restarting to try again that much sooner. I refined my movement between areas and mastered the art of switching baits and lures to fit the situation. All of these factors felt like they were building towards something. Every small improvement and every 60+ fish run felt like a reminder that, with a little luck, any attempt could be the one. But maybe it was all just in my head, because as the attempt counter climbed into the 200s, and then into the 300s, encapsulating another 20 hours of fishing time, I still hadn't been able to so much as match my personal best, let alone beat it. I began wondering whether I'd reached the limits of this strategy. So out of desperation for any extra edge, I committed several hours to seeking out any more bubble spots I could find. The 2 I'd already worked into the strategy were making a huge difference, so seeking out more might provide the boost I needed. It was a Hail Mary for sure, but I honestly couldn't think of anything else. Luckily, I did manage to track down this spot at the night market where bubbles churned from 11 AM until 2:50 PM. Its distance from shore was far from ideal, but I figured it could still save some time, so I retooled my route once more to work it in. In particular, I took the mines section of the run, which ordinarily came right near the beginning, and made it the last thing I would go for. This made sure I had ample time to get the lake fish, early river fish, and make a pit stop at Ginger Island, all before 11 AM, when I need to be at the beach to make the most of these bubbles. It is worth noting that, in comparison to my previous routes, this one served more as a guideline than a definite path. An ideal run would follow the route exactly, but since the bubble spots required me to be in specific areas at specific times, sometimes I'd have to shuffle around the locations in order to adhere to that schedule. Maybe the lake fish would take too long, so I'd skip the town river and backtrack for it later. Or maybe I'd finish the night market early and swing over to the sewers and forest before needing to be at the tide pools. Every attempt was extremely variable, but the core idea remained. Follow the bubbles. And I think I was onto something, because the very next attempt after working this strategy in, I matched my personal best. And by attempt 332, I beat it by a single fish. Emboldened by this sudden improvement, I doubled down on my bubble hunt. Even one more good spot could make all the difference. But I didn't find one more spot. I found 2. The first admittedly wasn't that great, being on the far side of the mountain lake starting at 7 AM. Reaching it involved riding a lot farther than usual, burning another 10 minutes or so of travel time, but it did help to speed up the opening section of the run considerably. Between this spot and reasonable legend luck, I was able to catch all the lake fish I needed before 8 AM more often than not. The second spot was more beneficial in theory, but working it in would require big changes to the early segment of the route. This unassuming patch of water in Cindersap Forest would begin bubbling at 6:10 in the morning and go all the way until 2:50 in the afternoon, giving me ample time to catch pretty much every freshwater fish. Problem was, I typically used all my time before 11 AM to catch the lake fish and take advantage of the octopus's early schedule on Ginger Island, and then the bubbles by the night market would carry me through until 2:50 PM, giving me no real opportunity to take advantage of this. Still, bubbles had been proving so helpful, and I knew that passing this spot up, especially given how long it lasted, would be foolish. So I took the plunge, restructuring my route with every bubble spot in mind. It was significantly different from my established route, which did scare me because I'd had so much success with that one. But this new approach did have a couple key benefits. First, it places most of the fish that require magic bait near the start of the run rather than near the end, meaning I'd waste less time if the odds weren't in my favor. And with the increased bite rate from bubbles bolstering those odds, the magic bait lottery suddenly seemed a lot less intimidating. Also, since the distance between the forest pond and the secret woods is so short, It removes the need for this long detour from the witch's swamp to the secret woods, which ate up considerable time on previous attempts. It's not all better though, as pushing Ginger Island this late in the route would once again force me to use magic bait for the octopus and tilapia. And with no bubbles to help me there, catching both of them quickly would be a daunting prospect that had the potential to stomp out an otherwise amazing run. But maybe it was a risk worth taking. So I put the route into action, and the results were disappointing. Even with the bubble boost, getting past the forest pond in time took an absurd amount of luck. And even when I did, the ocean fish usually quashed my dreams anyway. I wanted to believe that this method had potential, and there were times when that potential shone through. But as attempt after attempt drowned before my eyes, I couldn't help but wonder whether I'd put too much faith in the bubble strategy. But honestly, what alternative did I have? I already knew that the old route wasn't cutting it, and I'd run out of ideas to improve or change the strategy in any meaningful way. So with nothing but blind optimism fueling me, I persevered. And I'm glad I did, because attempt 536 never would have happened otherwise. As always, it started off at the mountain lake. I somehow managed to get everything I needed before 7 AM, not even utilizing these bubbles, and I immediately warped to the beach. I took the shortcut to the forest and reached the pond by 7:20. Even though these bubbles would last until 2:50 PM, ideally I wanted to be out of here before 11 AM to capitalize on the bubbles at the night market too. And luck smiled on me today, as I managed to catch every fish available here, other than the catfish, by 10 o'clock. I rushed to the secret woods and hooked the wood skip immediately, landing on the beach before the bubbles even began. It was far too early to celebrate, but this was an astounding early pace. And that pace continued in full force, as I caught all 3 magic bait dependent fish I needed here by 11:30. Frustratingly though, the 3 fish that can be caught with wild bait actually took considerably longer. I hauled in the final fish, the sea cucumber, just past 1 PM, and made haste for the Pirate Cove, where the pufferfish's 4 o'clock deadline was fast approaching. Thankfully the small variety of fish here allowed me to hook it, plus the stingray and a sneaky gourmand statue, by 3 PM. I wasted no time doubling back to the mountains for the crab pots I'd left behind, then hopped down and snagged the angler without much fuss. Following that was a quick trip to the Witch's Swamp for a catfish and a void salmon, which thankfully came back to back. And I was in Calico Desert by 4:30, and within 20 minutes, I was done there too. This run was going so unbelievably well, so smoothly, that I legitimately took a moment here to double check my fish collection and make sure I hadn't missed anything. And somehow, I hadn't. This run was just that good. But I still had a long way to go, so I warped to the night market and made it to the submarine right as it opened. And while the deep sea fish weren't as kind as they could have been, I still hooked them all, as well as a super cucumber and a 2% chance of a pearl, just past 7 PM. Now normally this is where I would go to the tide pools and clean up the remaining ocean fish, but seeing as the bubbles there wouldn't start until 9:20 PM, I deviated from the route and ran to the sewers instead, scooping up the mutant carp, regular carp, and slime jack with time still remaining to dart over and catch the glacier fish, the final river fish I needed. If only it had been that simple. See, hooking the glacier fish wasn't an issue, but for whatever reason, be it nerves, exhaustion, or just plain bad luck, I could not catch this fish for the life of me. Try, fail, try, fail, try, fail. It took until my 4th try, wasting more than an hour to finally catch it. Just goes to show that, even after so much practice, the glacier fish can still get the best of me. Battered but not beaten, I hurried to the tide pools and reeled in the crimson fish, halibut, and squid easily enough. With only 3 hours to go, I warped to Ginger Island, bracing myself for the worst. Any hope I had of completing the challenge hinged on catching an octopus, here and now. Even with my old route, where I would use wild bait to increase my chances, this one fish had caused more resets than almost any other. Now, forced to rely on magic bait, it would be foolish to think that this run had any chance. And yet... I pushed down my nerves and excitement long enough to wrangle it in, and quickly followed it up with a lionfish. This one twist of fate put me in the best position I'd ever been in, and I knew I had to proceed very carefully. From here, my route would have me catch the tilapia and blue discus, then get to the mines, catch the ghostfish, stonefish, and ice pip, then warp back and make it to the caldera in time for a lava eel. But my intuition told me that the whole process would simply take too long, even with the best luck possible. I could try and catch the lava eel on floor 100 to save some travel time, but the odds of even hooking one there were just too abysmal to realistically consider. No matter how I looked at this situation, it just seemed hopeless. But as I considered all the remaining fish, an idea came to me. Maybe there was another way. Going off pure instinct, I ditched my route and warped to the mines instead. I cast my first line at midnight, and after a series of unbelievably fortunate catches, I pulled in the last fish I needed, the ice pip, at 12:50. I rushed back to Ginger Island and played my trump card. I knew there was a small section right near the dig site where I could catch the tilapia and blue discus. From there, the caldera was right next door. Could one in-game hour be enough to do all that? I wasn't sure, but I was out of options, so I did the only thing I could do. I got on my horse and I sprinted for it. 1:10 a.m. I arrived at the dig site and caught a golden walnut. 1:20 a.m. I caught a midnight carp, and then a fossilized spine. Finally, as 1:30 struck, I got the blue discus, but by now I could see the writing on the wall. Even if I hooked the tilapia immediately, there simply wasn't enough time. I still kept going, and the tilapia did show itself with 10 minutes to spare, putting me at 66 out of 67 fish. It was over. This run, well, I'll let my past self do the talking.
So it's almost midnight. I just did this run where I only missed the lava eel, and I got like a pearl and the gourmand statue. I don't know if my luck gets any better than this. This might be my limit. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. This is really draining me. And getting 66 out of 67 is so conflicting because it really excites me, and I know that in theory it's possible to get everything, but in practice it's just so unbelievably luck-based, and I'm gonna keep trying for a little bit, but this might have to be where it ends. If it is, I think I can rest happy. But part of me really still wants to go for it.
I passed out shortly thereafter, right at the mouth of the volcano. As you could probably tell, I was exhausted by the end of this run. I had given this challenge everything I had and then some. Over 150 hours of recording time alone, not even considering all the research and planning. I had experienced highs, lows, and everything in between. And all of it had culminated in this one run. This amazing, ridiculous roller coaster of a run. I pride myself on my patience and tenacity, but this challenge had put those to the ultimate test, and I honestly didn't know how much more I had to give to this project. So for my own sake, in order to prevent myself from fishing for the rest of my life, I gave myself a hard limit of 600 total attempts, 64 more after this one. If I couldn't do it by then, I'd concede that it just wasn't meant to be, and I'd rest happy knowing that I'd given it my all. One way or another, this journey was about to come to a close, but I wasn't going down without a fight. You'd better believe I made the most of each and every one of those remaining attempts. Come hell or high water, let's finish this.
Alright, so I just put on my microphone because this is far and away the best pace I've ever been on. Let's see. Let's see if I can pull this off. Please be kind to me. Early stonefish would be huge. Okay, that's really, really, really good. Please, I've worked so long on this challenge. Okay, that's an ice pip. I'm not gonna have no time to make it to the caldera, I don't think. So I'm gonna have to go for a floor 100 lava eel, which is not great. That's a ghost fish. That's a ghost fish. Okay. Please. Please. Just give me a chance. No way. No way. No way. This is actually happening. Just catch it. I just have to catch this. That's it! Oh my god, I'm done! Oh, the Master Angler achievement, it popped up. No way! No way! I don't believe I'm actually physically shaking. 150. Every fish in Stardew Valley caught on the same day. I can't believe I actually pulled that off. I'm done. I'm done. Indeed, I was done. After so much planning, discovery, research, determination, and more than anything, luck, I had finally caught every fish in Stardew Valley in just one day. I collected my long-awaited star drop from Willy and gave Chloe's calloused, briny hands the rest they deserved. This challenge took a lot out of me. It tested my resolve. It made me fight tooth and nail for every little victory, and it didn't let up until the bitter end. Dramatic as this may sound, I think I lost the part of myself while playing this challenge. A part of myself that will stay forever locked within Fishy Farm. And I can't help but wonder whether all of this was worth it. But as I look at this complete fishing collection and reflect on everything that led to this point, I don't think I'd change a thing. Thanks for watching.